So, how to answer the question is the other issue or other area we raised. Well, the question must be fully answered to be accepted. This will rarely be one line, but rather a lengthy paragraph. So, make sure that you actually understand the question. Which unit is the question in? And what section of the unit is the question in? And then what is the question? What is the question asking? In the pack there's what's described as a verb descriptor. What does it mean when it says describe or explain? If you do answer the question fully, then it can be complete. Second area we mentioned at our introduction is your work evidence. Now, the work evidence is based on what you're doing and what you've done. For both forms of evidence, you will make a great use of documentation. Any documentation that passes through your hands or that you deal with, whether it's drawings, induction forms, toolbox talks, briefings, emails, sent or received, or any other issue, delivery notes, sections of diaries, anything is a great help. All documentation you use proves something about your work, something you're doing. Now, to you it may seem ordinary, but nevertheless it's doing its job. So you will notice in the pack a document list. Now, it might be that you call these documents by some other name, but they'll be doing much the same job. And whatever documents you've got, then that's good. They can be used. So you need to gather two lots of documentation. One for the job you're doing, and also one for you've done in the past. Maybe a year ago would be ideal, 8 months ago, year and a half ago, 2 years ago, whatever. Gather the documentation and put it to one side. The one that the documentation refers to the work you're doing now, I shall use as a basis for an observation. So I will then discuss with you and consider with you how you use this documentation and observe you using it when I visit you, and observe your management, supervision of the team under you and the site. The other documentation for the past job will be used as a learner testimony. Like your account of a job you did through the documentation and perhaps through my interviewing you on the dictaphone. Now that past job that you're using as learner testimony needs to be able to be authenticated. We need to have somebody who's like your line manager or in a position of responsibility that can say, yes, he did that, and sign to say he did, or that you did. And that might have some bearing on which job you choose as your learner testimony. Maybe the person's not available anymore, he might have moved abroad. So yes, you need a job you did in the past that you have sufficient evidence for, ideally as much paperwork as possible, and someone that can authenticate it. Now, that documentation you provide can either be the originals or it can be copied in some way. Now, if they are the originals and you want them back at the end of the MVQ process, then we can return them to you, having photocopied them ourselves, you see. So that isn't a problem. It isn't any help if you include as documentation blank forms. Really, blank forms don't tell us anything, but that you've got a form. The interesting bit for us is how you use the form, or how the form is used. So having an accident book or an incident book is great, but if there's a fill-in in it, if there's an entry, that tells us more, doesn't it? Even if it's a near miss. Same with any other kind of form. CDM regulations you might have. Risk assessments. Any qualifications you have and photocopies of them. SMSTS, for example. First aid. Anything. Any documentation is useful, whether it be for the observation, for the job you're doing, or whether it be for the learner testimony, the job you've done. All you have to do is gather the documentation. I can help you put it together. That isn't a problem. So you can focus really on answering the questions. Remember those knowledge questions, those ones where you only answer the standalone ones. If it's got a cross next to it, you don't answer it. Because you've answered it. Why answer it twice? So how can we summarise then? Well, simply put, answer the standalone questions, but not the ones with an X. Gather the documentations for the project you're doing now and one from the past.